Hi guys, I'm Austin, the founder of Fourth Dimension Wellness. This is our little podcast, if you will. It's more or less just a conversation between us coaches. But on today's session, we have Coach Gil with us. Gil is our family sessions coach. We have the breathwork coach, the family sessions coach. I'm Austin. I'm the founder of Fourth Dimension Wellness. And we're just going to have an open dialogue like we did last week. Just around 4D as a whole, recovery, and then different aspects of what the different coaches do. Because a question I get a lot, is
it falling on you?
No, I think it's good. Is that better?
Yeah. I will edit.
No, let's post it just like this. By the way, so while we're on this topic, we post this entire thing as is, uncut, on our YouTube page. If you guys want to see just sort of the silly, stupid behind the scenes and what it really sounds like to have a conversation about recovery between us three.
That's true.
I'm going to introduce Gil. Gil's our family sessions coach. I've known Gil a long time. Gil was actually early in my recovery. Gil was the guy I looked at and admired. I liked what he said. I liked the way he presented himself. I liked that he brought up fun and laughter to his recovery. And I always sort of aimed to aim my recovery like I saw Gil's, as it would be, right? The universe decided to put Gil back in my life. We were having a conversation at a gym. I was telling him about Fourth Dimension Wellness and the direction we're going. I'm really excited. And Gil has a much more extensive background in recovery coaching as a whole. And so we're having this long conversation and he's giving me all this advice. And towards the end of it, I was like, man, I really need Gil on my team. So that's all I'll say, man. I'll let Gil sort of introduce himself and talk about whatever he wants to, and then I'll probably poke questions at him.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm Gil Garza. My history in this thing is I started working in recovery, quickly became a case manager, and then I was like, I kind of like this. So then I became an addictions counselor, licensed LCDC. Went back for my master's, and I'm 3 credit hours for my MSW now. So I'm a practicing social worker with a LCDC license. And a lot of my work began with working with families in case management there. And it was a dimension that I was interested in probably out of selfish purposes originally. A lot of recovery is done out of selfish incentive.
Yeah.
Man, I got to figure out this thing so I could fix my life. And then you're like, well, I guess I'll tell everybody else about it. And that's kind of what happened, if I'm being honest. It allowed me to have sort of a deep dive into not just the personal experiences around recovery, but then as the systems approach. And that was, really enlightening to sort of the nature and the origin of all things, I don't even like the word addiction, but, addiction or substance abuse, or, any sort of maladaptive behavioral thing, it all comes from an environment. And in many ways, it's a normal reaction for someone's biology in this particular environment. And so it was really interesting to see kind of patterns and, different dynamics that were coming out of these families, and then starting to understand how I, as a third party, can be a participant in that without ruffling up too many feathers, right? It's a careful dance. So.
One of the questions I had, what drove you towards families in general? Was it just kind of how it happened, or did you have anything in your personal experience? Not that you have to explain any of that, but was it anything that kind of popped up that said, man, this is the avenue that I want to drive down?
I mean, really, it's more, chance than anything. Well, I say chance, I don't. The universe, so to speak, right, put it in front of me. It's a pretty normal progression going from, starting and working in, in treatment settings. You become, an RCA, and then you become a recovery specialist. And then, part of that is the case management aspect of it. So I became a recovery coach shortly after. And it just seemed to me at the time, it wasn't oh, this is the most interesting thing ever. It just felt like a normal progression from where I was at the moment. Okay. I was kind of in between this idea of counseling and in between this idea of life development coaching, which I was doing at the time as well. And both of them were really interesting. I just didn't really know what to do next. And both avenues kind of brought me back to family. So that's kind of how it happened.
Cool.
Yeah, and I can tell you, Gil prepped me for this. He's like, dude, you're going to get a lot of calls from loved ones and families, and like, how are you handling that? And I told him how I'm handling it, and he's like, that's good. He's like, you might want some more help. I'm like, yeah, no, absolutely. I was like, I feel like that's actually the progression is going. It's we'll keep calling it universe. We can also call it God, right? Presents these opportunities where at that exact moment, in that exact time, and guys, this has been happening since the day I got sober, right? At that exact moment, at that exact time, the perfect thing got placed right in front of me. And that day was Gil, and it was like later that day, I was supposed to have a conversation with a mother, and like my approach with her got tweaked a little bit from the conversation I had with Gil. And like now I can tell you every time I have conversations, and it's a lot of moms, it's girlfriends, occasionally it's fathers. Every time I have those conversations, now I get to be like, hey, just so you guys know, you guys are included in this, right? That part of the 4D package is like, you guys are going to be able to communicate with Gil. He's going to communicate with me, and we're all going to work towards the same goal of like, not just sobriety, right? Because we quickly get past the bottle or the line or the shot or whatever, right? And then it becomes like, how do we maximize this new life in sobriety? And like Gil was just hinting at, right? Like, one of the easiest ways to do that, right, is to make sure everybody's focus is aimed in the right direction. And a lot of times parents who, nothing against the parents, but I can speak from my experience. My parents didn't help, right? A lot of my drug and alcohol addiction may have started in the household when I was young. And so like now they want to know like, okay, like how am I supposed to act, right? Like, God bless my father, right? He does nothing wrong by having a couple beers occasionally, but like he was like, should I never have a beer around my son again? And like, and so that's why it's so important and so helpful to have someone like Gil on our team.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about just playing into the, being specific about the roles that we're supposed to be playing in the recovery setting, because you have someone, going through it, and and inherently it's a healing process, right? Recovery being a healing process. And throughout that whole time, you have a system that's deeply damaged by your behavior, and the trust is not there. And yet you're completely reliant on that system because you've burned every other resource down. Right. So if there's people, if there's people there, right? If there's people there, they cared way too much about you and they sacrificed way too much.
Yeah.
And so how do we use that sort of love and energy from the family side of things to actually support the recovery instead of hinder it?
Yeah. And you were kind of like leading me right into that question, because I thought that, right, is that, how do you balance like the difficult, like that difficult thing, right? Where it's like, the child, this healing process, whether it be the child, whether it be the father or the mother or whatever it is, right? And they're looking to go down this healing process. And me, I know, like my parents, my partner at the time, and then me now would kind of have that semblance of like, I want to fix this, right? I need to heal this cut somehow. And some of the times what I see is that like the best way to heal the cut is get out of the way. Like, how do you kind of approach that? Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of different dynamics that come to play. There's the absentee one, and there's the enabling one, and there's different sort of categorizations for these family roles that have to exist in a toxic environment, and all of it needs to be kind of ironed out. And it'd be a little bit much to kind of go into like what you would do specifically with each person, but one of the biggest and most important aspects of recovery is self-efficacy, is the ability to rebuild independence and self-confidence and self-esteem, right? Without those things, you have no trajectory, right? And that's what we're really trying to do, right? Like when we talk about being a recovered addict, right, we're recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind. And what is hopeless about the world? Well, I see no future in it, right? Nothing about the future excites me. And so we have to basically go back to the foundation, and we have to start building up from there. And there's a lot of really common approaches, and you guys have probably heard the terminology like a recovery job, right? It's like something like low stress that just pays the bills that you can be consistent at, you know, for me it was washing dishes. Very zen. I don't know why I like that, but you know, whatever it is, right? It's just about starting to be the person in charge of your, you know, of your consequences that you've caused. Because whether you know, it doesn't really matter how much you apologize for the things that you've done to the people that you love. You truly will never know the depth and the impact that has on them. And that's not meant to cripple you. It's meant to inspire you to create your own sort of system of, you know, of power, right? A system of coping skills, of, you know, of a social network, right? In order to support your recovery in a way that doesn't rely specifically on those very valuable people.
Okay. No, it's sick. I love it. Self-efficacy. That's a very intelligent way to talk about shit that I talk about every day with my clients, right? Is I call it get your 3 wins, right? We need your spiritual win, your physical win, and your mental win. And essentially those things build your confidence, and those things make you self-reliant, and those things give you purpose, right? At the very beginning of that sentence, Gil started with like, you know, what's the purpose, right? I'm hopeless. What is the purpose? And like, that is exactly what this is geared toward. Because, you know, I managed this partial hospitalization program, this house, this sober living home with Brett for a little while, for like 2 years, saw a lot of clients. And the biggest thing I observed with these guys was almost this doom, because you could sense it was coming. You could sense the relapse was coming because they didn't know what the point was. Like, what is the point of being sober, right? What is the point of putting the drugs down? I'm miserable. I have no life. I have no future. The world is doom and gloom. And so often, like, those little things can be fixed if we just install some little victories every day. Just some little bitty victories every day. And then spark ideas and imagination and have passionate conversations with people about like a direction and an aim, right? I'm always talking about direction and aim. Like, what's our purpose? What's our aim? Where are we headed? And so that's super cool, man. That just sort of doubles. I'm going to start using that self-efficacy.
Self-efficacy. That's
my shit.
I mean, it's the root of it, man. Like, we have to be able to take responsibility for the consequences that come from our life in sobriety and not. I mean, it doesn't really matter, right? The drugs are such a small portion of this recovery thing. Yes, they cause incredible problems, right? But we don't just use drugs for no reason, right? We're trying to fix something, and that problem existed before the drugs were present, right? And so you remove the drugs, you remove the solution, and now the problem remains. And a lot of times that problem at least has some validation by the environment that it came from, right? And so there has to be work on all sides. And the challenge is that if you burned everything down to the ground, you know, you kind of have 2 perceptions. It's like, 1, whoever I burned deserve it, or 2, I'm a worthless piece of shit, right? And neither of those are productive for the recovery setting. And so if you have your support system who really, whether they know it or not, based off of the damage that you've done, play into that role. I mean, they either confirm that they're not worth building it up, or that I'm too worthless and, you know, and full of shame that what's the point? Yeah. And so being able to motivate, as Austin said, these little victories for the person in recovery, and then create safe boundaries, emotional and communication, and oftentimes physical boundaries between, you know, the individual in recovery and the family is super, super important.
It was one thing that I heard through right when I was trying to get sober, and it was, I don't know who said it, but it was something like, don't step on another man's transcendence, right? And what I was never accountable to was my own transcendence, not knowing, and transcendence meaning the sense of growth in the world, right? Like, as you watch like a young man or a young lady grow into the person that they become, right? I was always trying to stunt that, right? And I didn't even know that that's what I was doing. But what I heard when you had said, what was it, the efficacy?
Self-efficacy.
Self-efficacy, yeah. I had heard that, like, what I had heard there is that like I was not accountable to my own transcendence, right? I was growing in a world, but I didn't want to, or I was for whatever reason, what was going on inside or wherever, I was trying to mute it out and stamp it out.
Well, I mean, I've been doing this for a while now, and working with thousands of people, hundreds of families. When I got into this, it's not that I thought I was like some crazy sociopath or something like that, but I thought I was going to run into like a lot of way worse people, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, and by bad people, I'm not trying to categorize anyone, but, specifically what I'm saying is people that can do bad things to good people and not feel anything about it. I thought I was going to run into a lot of those because what are we doing in addiction? We're harming the people that we care the most about. And in order to live with that, there's an incredible change in sort of the way you view yourself and the way you view the world. It has to change. For your ego to stay intact, it has to change. You can either over-identify, I kind of consider this like gang members or like, I don't know, Lil Wayne, right? Where it becomes like a cultural identity kind of thing where it's like, I smoke weed and it's like, well, neat,
Neat.
Right? And then you have, the other side of things where people are just paralyzed by these decisions and the harm that they've done. And oftentimes, like I said, that's kind of the intersection that I find these individuals. It's one or the other. And then, from that position, the first thing we do is try and rebuild. I like how you said transcendence. To me, what that means really is, that you should be getting back in touch with that sort of like childlike potential, right? That sort of beginner's mind idea of like everything is possible. Right? All I got to do is like sit here and go through the world and it's going to be awesome, right? It can seem a little naive, but that sort of mentality goes a really, really long way. And I see it present in people that are doing all the, quote unquote, right things in recovery, right? They're becoming a part of some sort of community. They're doing some sort of recovery work, right? They are, physically with their body doing something different, right? It's not some mental game. And you start to see that stuff. And then the traction starts to pick up, and then, and then the role of the family is to try not, to do their best and with love, not get in the way of that traction as the individual is trying to rebuild their life in one way or another. Yeah. Right.
And the thing that you had said there too, with along with the transcendence, right, is a lot of the reading that I do, and they say it in however many different words, but I'll say it as simple as this, right? Is like seeing the world through a child's eyes. And it was one thing through this process where like you kind of you surrender, right? To like life is gonna life, and happenings are happening all around me, whether I like it or not. Am I going to walk with it, or am I going to forcibly try to fight it back? And I always saw what would happen when I fought it back. So eventually it's like, okay, I'm just gonna give up to this thing and allow my transcendence, right? And allow myself to see this world as was first intended, man. And before I started really mutilating everything. Right?
So, I mean, it has to come from, for a position of love and a position of humility, right? It has to come from this idea that like, hey man, like I'm capable of beautiful love of other people. Everybody else is probably capable of that too, right? And if that's the case, that's a very hopeful message, right? And then the other thing is the humility aspect of it. There's so much terror. There's so many terrible things in our world that are easy to get fixated on. Any number of wars, any number of abuse, any number of any crime ever, right? It's easy to fixate on that stuff. And the question that I just always encourage people to ask is like, how do I know? Like, what puts me in a position to actually know the facts of a situation? And why is my attention focused there, right? Why is my attention not focused inward in a way that allows me to actually make change, right, instead of just use external stimuluses to justify my terrible behavior?
Bingo. Yeah. No, absolutely. Right. Like the easiest way to evoke change in the world that you see as doom and gloom is to change yourself. Right. Is to hone in on focus on yourself, get better at doing things every single day, and then help others. Right. And it kind of just piggybacks off what you're just saying, right? Like the more I found that I was able to help others early in recovery, the more it actually helped me, right? The more I dove into other people's problems, the more I really just jumped down into the pit of doom and gloom and said, dude, listen, been here. This is the way out. Try this, try that, try this. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Regardless, it always gave me this sense of like, that's exactly what I was meant to be doing with that hour of my life, right?
Well, there's a beauty in the surrender.
Yeah.
I mean, because you become a student in many ways, a beacon, so to speak, right? Of this hope, of this message by your personal experience. And when you're communicating that, you have no responsibility over what that information is supposed to do to that person's life. All you're responsible for is just the honesty of the teaching you've received as a student. And you know what I mean? Like there's no, you can't, and we hear this all the time. It's like, there's no way to take, responsibility for someone else's recovery, right? And we can't place expectations on this or that. And that really comes from a position of understanding how your actions, you can change this internal condition within with your actions and changes in behavior. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like this is a systemic thing, right? It's a systemic thing that we need to approach as a system. But at the same time, we have to respect the individuals that make up that system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of like to back before you guys went back and forth there, right? Like it's this energy output that I was putting out in the world. And I don't know about y'all, but like I believe Austin, you're very much believe in like the energy of the world and things going around, right? And like we talked about it, I think last time in regard to music and stuff like that. But through the time I was carrying on, right? Like the negative energy that I was putting, I never thought about it in the time, in the moment. I was just like, God, what am I doing, right? Like, or what's next, right? But all of this negative energy that I dropped into the world, right? And even when I get caught up or looped up into like political stuff or war or something going around that has nothing really, like I can't actionably fix that, right? Sign anything to fix it. But what I can do is put out like this positive energy, right? Into the surrounding community, into my surrounding family, into these people that quite honestly, I was putting some negative shit out for quite some time. So like all that negative shit, look at what it caused. Can it be the same on the other hand with the positive stuff that I put out? Can I carry or help carry people through days, through months, and do that by just, like you said, being that beacon of hope or just a beacon of positivity and like, it's a good thing to see those type of people walk through the door, right? Like you were talking about with Gil early on in your recovery, right? Like just the happiness that he would bring to recovery. And it's like, it's good to see him, man. You know what I mean? And like, you couldn't pinpoint why, but like this positive energy that we get to now put out into the world, like, what a fucking thing, man. Like,
I loved how you connected those two things. And I think, right, like when we are active in addiction or, active in our spiritual dissonance, we are playing score in many ways, right? We got a scoreboard in our head that says like, Gil 0, world 1, therefore I get to do something selfish to even the score, right? And then the world does something selfish and then I get to do one more thing. And as long as the scoreboard is right, I'm okay. And so when we start to poke holes in it, that's when sensitivities come up. And at the root of that is that humility that I was talking about and the idea that I don't know the score. I couldn't possibly, I am not capable of such awareness. And if I was, I wouldn't be on this planet or what, I would be floating around like some Zen master, you know what I mean? With some golden aura, or Mr. Manhattan on Mars or something.
Right, Mr. Manhattan.
Right. And so the opposite of that is that now I don't play score and I just put this positive energy out with no expectation. With no expectation that I'm winning points or that, that the world is going to change in this way or another. And what happens is really compounding effects, right? Just as, the problems that are in our addiction don't manifest overnight largely they manifest over years, if not, decades. And so the positivity is the same way in that, you're not accomplishing anything because you put expectations on something and then you do it, right? You're accomplishing it because you're doing all these little things throughout the day. And there's a butterfly effect. There's a wave that happens from each of these positive interactions. And then after a few years, you've noticed that you've built this entire different sort of frequency and ecosystem around you based off of all these reverberations that you probably only had a part to play in, but still some sense of correlation and responsibility.
Yeah. What you guys are talking about is law of attraction, right?
Yeah.
Law of attraction is badass, man. I'll spend entire sessions combining law of attraction with visualization and manifestation and coherence and all these different sciences that are saying the same fucking thing, frankly, right? And what they're saying is if you show up as X, Y, and Z, expect X, Y, and Z to show up for you, right? And on the flip side of that, you see it the other way all the time. I chat with people who, the world is doom and gloom and poor me and poor me and poor me. And then I watch them and terrible shit does just keep happening to them. And I wonder if the law of attraction is working in a way where you sit around and you blame the world and you don't take responsibility and everything fucking sucks. And then you kind of just keep getting rained on. Well, I think you're attracting those things into your life. You're inviting them into your life, right? And so on the flip side, right, what I've noticed is when we can get people, and I have a couple clients like this right now, and when I can get them just to, again, back to the 3 little victories, right? Start doing things, getting a little more positive and spreading some positive energy. And we talk about this law of attraction, and I have them do this visualization meditations where they're happy and they're joyous and they're free. And to watch the perspective change, right? And I think what happens is, the law of attraction and bouncing these frequencies around those people start to show up for you, and your entire world starts to change. And,
Yeah. And one of the things that you said that I really liked, it kind of just sparked something in my brain was you were talking about the scoreboard, right? And the thought pattern of as I continue to put out this positive stuff and the law of attraction continues, and my perception around it too starts to shift. So then therefore when those bad things do pop up, because they will, right? I'm just happy to be on the field, man. You know what I mean? I'm just happy to be here and to get to experience this stuff. So the law of attraction, absolutely, right? If we're putting positive stuff out, positive stuff's going to come back. If we're putting negative stuff, it's going to come back. But there's also going to be some semblances of drops in there, right? And what I find now, and it's again not an everyday thing, and I'm sure you guys have a similar experience too. But when I have these negative things kind of drop in my life, I find myself on the other side of it, taking a shower that night, being that happened, right? Instead of being let's burn everything down around because that happened.
Yeah.
So I think a good question to phrase, right? And it's how do you practice the law of attraction in a positive way? What does your day-to-day look like as you go throughout the day to live it in a way to where those people show up for you in that exact way, right? And anyone want to start? Anyone want to take a whack at this?
I mean, to me, man, my brain goes biblical for sure, right? We practice that golden rule in the idea that it's we show up for others in the way that we want to, we want them to show up for us.
Sick.
And if we can, do that and set our eyes on the gratitude and the beauty of things, amazing things happen. Another practice, that gratitude, and we should, we can get into that stuff too, but right. Gratitude is an incredible practice. And another thing that I really love in sort of positioning the heart is volunteering and donating to causes that you care about. Now, everybody could use more money. And, counselors don't make a lot of it, right? So I certainly could use some more. Right. But the idea being is that the minute I start giving, right, I immediately recognize that there was an abundance to be appreciated.
Bingo.
Right? The cup was full and I couldn't take any more, yet somehow I gave and everything's fine. My understanding of the cup and its volume is incorrect.
Correct.
Right? It's actually, the equation is completely wrong. right? And that's a beautiful thing, because due to my own sort of insanity and my brain's obsession in logic and understanding things, I can oversimplify the beauty and magnificence of God in our world. It's just so easy, right, to focus on sort of the humanity of things instead of thinking about these positive, right, these positive sort of embodiments that we actually want to see in other people, right? Yeah. Like, okay, so the world is selfish. Like, when was the last time you were selfish, right? Right? Because maybe you can't change the world being selfish, but you can certainly start somewhere, right?
This morning when I took the last piece of toast.
And to that same question, and probably parroting a little bit of what you said, maybe not straight biblical, but can I walk through my day? Can I walk through life with responsive faith instead of reactive fear?
Absolutely.
Right? Because man, I think Austin and I had talked about it last time, and Brett was an angry human being and blah, blah, blah. But like, in all honesty, all it was fear. I was walking through life just neck deep in fear of like how people thought about me, what people thought about me, how people were going to react to me, and all this type of stuff. And what I find is with that faith also comes awareness and presence of the people around me, right? And therefore, giving these things, knowing that, I'm good, like knowing that like everything's going to be okay when I do give it up or whatever it might be. And yeah, when I come back, usually, like you said, when I'm looking at the cup again, I'm like, man, that was, I'm fine, right? Yeah, like everything was full enough and I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
And it's because like I was walking through life. And again, when I say like responsive fear instead of responsive faith instead of reactive fear, because that's what I always found is like my reactions were tend to lean on the side of fear. And it was something a real intelligent man and one of my mentors had said to me was, where there's fear, there is no faith.
Yeah. And I think that they're kind of two sides to the same coin. You know, I associate fear with sort of like our humanity, and then faith in sort of like that supernatural sort of power that's present that we don't get to understand, but also don't deserve to understand. And both of them are really sort of powerful tools in understanding the world and how our perspective can change, right? Because if I'm looking at the world, specifically at the negative things, I'm only ever, it's confirmation bias. I'm only ever going to see negative things. I'm only ever going to interact with negative people. I'm only ever going to, right? My world is going to be blinded and limited to those things in which I'm seeking. And so the minute that we kind of change that paradigm and we go on the other side of things, right? We go on this faith side of things. What I've found is that you start to see miracles. You start to see blessings. You start to see positivity, gratitude. You start to see all the beautiful things that are part of this world that previously we were so closed off to, right? And that alone has an incredible ability to transform one's heart.
Absolutely. It opens it up. Right. It opens it up to these things that you didn't either think were possible or just like you said, had no idea were even present there. Right. And your view on people, places, and things just starts to expand, and then there becomes more and more room and more room. That's the thing. Like, you don't get full. Right. You don't get full when it comes to like gratitude and stuff. It just continues to make more room.
And so then the $1 million question is, where does the fear go, right? Like, how does having this faith just make the fear disappear? Because that's exactly my experience with it, right? Full of fear, right? And I can't elaborate any better than the two of you just did on that question, so I'm not going to try. If I were to rewind and say, how I get through my day, right? It's a tremendous amount of gratitude. It's a tremendous amount of prayer. It's a tremendous amount of meditation, the gym, and being of service to others, right? In my office, on the wall, in huge letters, it says, "You get what you give." And I know, in my experience, when I have nothing to give, but I find a way to give more, I realized that I did have more to give, right? And you, with the cup analogy, man, nailed it. It's exactly what it is. And man, I have it in huge letters on my office, like right in front of my face. and you know, like Dave Matthews has a song about it, right? And like the more you listen to music, they're talking about it, right? And you're like, man, this sure is a happy motherfucker. What's he singing about, this asshole? Oh, you get what you give. Okay, maybe I'll try that one day, right? And then the more you dive into that, you more you realize that like the happiest people in the world are the people who give everything they got. I'm not suggesting you don't go home and feed your family, but you get what I'm saying, right?
What's the saying? It's like the closed hand doesn't get fed.
Yeah.
It's like, when you're so focused on the conservation of things, you leave no opportunity for the sort of the mystery of the universe to work in you, right? Again, it's just another act out of a limited understanding of, well, if I do this, this happens. It's like, who said that? Like, is that based off your experience? Is that based off of this? Well, where's your experience led you, right? Like, we need to be able to at least question our authority over the world, right? Like,
right.
If nothing else, just have an honest conversation with like, are you really in control? Right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how long is the cupcake on the counter before you eat it after you said you weren't going to eat it? Right? Like, how consistent am I in my expectations and goals? Right?
Yeah.
Like, how consistent? And all of a sudden I want to apply that performance to the way that the world and universe unfolds in all of its magnificence. Like, there's a considerable narcissistic sort of whiplash of that whole idea, right? Of like this, like, oh, I'm the greatest thing ever and I'm terrible. So yeah, of course the world would be a terrible place, right?
Yeah.
And the thing that you had said there too, and I'm not going to be able to spit it out.
Oh, I stole that.
That's a good one.
I stole that. I stole that from
pencil that away from later.
Yeah, from Russell Brand.
Just the way that like you view the world, like how like pompous we can be to look at the world as kind of instead of like us doing for the world doing for us, right? And you get so sucked down into that mindset that the world's not going to do what you want it to do ever, dude. Ever. Doesn't matter, right? It could be the most beautiful thing. You're gonna painting's not that great. You didn't sign it down in the right spot. Like seriously, I remember that mindset, and it was always because, well, no, I'm running this, right? And no matter what you do, because I don't even know what I want you to be, want you to do is wrong. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And I feel like, to kind of wrap it back to families and sort of that systems perspective, it's like, I feel like the challenge there is because you have two, often it's two, or three sort of like, recovery journeys, so to speak, happening simultaneously. And, you guys have seen what happens when you put two people, that are on fire for recovery and one of them turns, and then there's an over sort of allegiance to it, right? Like, we have to have safe boundaries. And the way that we do that in the family setting is we allow both people to heal in a way that is uninterfered. So it's like, because think about, if you're the parent and you have your scoreboard, right? Of like, my kid, 50, me 4. It's like, you're going to feel justified in anything that you do, but any sort of negativity that you pump into that life is going to hinder their ability to recover. Right. And I see that all the time is like, and there's some naivety that goes along with it, and like that idea of the pink cloud. You get a guy out and he's like 3 months sober and he's on fire and he's like, everything's amazing, and the parents are like
what are you talking
about? I'm still paying your rent. You know what I mean? Right? Like, and there's still a beauty there, and there's still a service to be done to the family. So how do we respect both things, right? And in my experience, it's been helped incredibly by sort of the guidance and mentorship of some sort of recovery coach, right? It's some sort of third party entity that can kind of play, I don't want to say like mediator, right? Because we're not keeping score, right? But we are there to hold accountability and kind of remind everybody of their function. Like, your function is to get sober and be happy, and your function is to stop enabling and be happy, right? And be a parent, right? Like, what do we want from a parent? We want this unconditional love, right? So when Bobby Joe calls you and says, Mom, I'm freaking out, I need money because of X, Y, and Z, you go, I'm sorry, sweetie, I totally believe in you and your ability to get that money and solve your problems. I love you no matter what. And then you hang up the phone. Yeah. Right? So that both parties can take responsibility for their actions, and they can both express themselves in a way that is actually truly authentic. I am in fear. I have no money. I love you. You can figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing there that you had said too about the family, and then Billy Joe, right? is the happiness part, right? And like we're all kind of like, I think, trying to find that single specific thing, whether you want to call it happiness, whatever you want to call it.
Feed
right?
your soul.
What'd you say? Feed your soul.
Feed your soul.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you're both trying to find it, but like what it sounds like sometimes is that you get up, right? If you have the enabler parent or the person that just doesn't want to do anything and take action on getting a job or anything like that, when we're talking about the money instance, right? That like they lose sight that they're after the same goal.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All the time. And it's because of a form of codependence, right? It's putting conditions on one another. If you do this, I will be happy, right? And we can already see, if I say it that plainly, we can all go, all right, yeah, that makes no sense. But we do it all the time. We do it all the time. And it's just in a magnified way when we're talking about families. It's like, okay, everything was good until Billy Joe, what was his name? I don't know. Bobby Jim or whatever, got addicted, and then the world was on fire. And so if he becomes unaddicted, the world will be better. Therefore, we have to focus all of our energy on him being sober. And it's not an appropriate dynamic. As I mentioned, right, in many ways, addiction is a natural reaction, or maybe not a natural reaction, a normal reaction to someone of a specific biology in a very specific environment, right? It is not some evil hex spell because, I don't know, your neighbor was a witch or something like that. Like, and people put all sorts of assumptions on this thing. And we can see very easily in the diversity of the recovery community that there is not a particular recipe. There's not a particular recipe that goes along and says, okay, yeah, this person addicted, right? We just don't have that ability. But what we can do is we can sort of dedicate ourselves to an inward focus, right? An inward focus, a focus on the self-efficacy piece for the parent and the child or whomever, right? In a way that allows both people to independently function well again, and then hopefully reunite in a healthier way.
Yeah. And, this might be a little bit off topic, but while we're talking about the parents and the dynamic with the parents, and this is a problem I keep running into, and there might not be an answer to this, but I'm just going to pose it to us anyway. How do we get the parent to... How do you properly explain to a parent that, like, unless your kid has some willingness to change his life, right? I'm here to listen to you, and God bless, and I love you, right? And here's a couple pointers, but like I can't make your kid be willing any more than you can. Yeah. And it's this crippling thing that I don't know how to answer, right? He hasn't experienced enough pain. You're enabling. I don't know what the exact answer is.
There isn't one. I mean, frankly, there isn't one. And everybody gets to that point. I've seen a lot of people change, and I've seen a lot of people not change. Mm-hmm. And and I can tell you what change looks like, but I can't tell you what happens internally, right, other than my own experience. Right. And from what I can tell, it is a little bit of a different sort of realization or epiphany that happens in each individual. And so really the idea is just to allow that natural sort of flow to take place, mm-hmm, without becoming too invested in it. Mm-hmm. And if you have a parent that is frustrated with the lack of progress with their kid, it means that they're too invested. Mm-hmm. And how could you not be? Mm-hmm. And that's the real challenge in the dynamic, mm-hmm, within working in families, is that how could you not be? It's a maternal instinct. It's a paternal instinct to be like, okay, my kid is suffering. Let's help. Right? Let's help to the best of our ability. But what happens is that the child doesn't actually realize what it takes to personally help themselves.
And so then the self-efficacy piece is gone.
And then they're completely reliant. In therapy, we call it learned helplessness, right? It's basically when you're, another term would be like, probably less PC, but, institutionalized. This idea that it's like you're so used to the support of a system that you're now incapable of providing those same needs for yourself.
And kind of like a small answer to what you had just brought up, because that was great the way that Gil went through it, right? It's just like an answer to a family is just what your open heart says. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to fix it by anything that you do or do not say. So I would think like whatever's on your heart, and usually what I found is the truth is the best, right? Like, man, this dude's just not willing to do it. I don't know why, or blah, 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 whatever it might be.
Well, there's a reason why the 12 steps worked, and therefore there's a reason why AA works, and then there's also a reason why Al-Anon works, which is the same program. You're asking both people to look inward, right? You're saying stop focusing and obsessing on this other person and their role and their responsibility to you, right? And start focusing on how much vulnerability and emotional investment that you're putting into them, and expecting something in return, right? Because, we want to say that it comes from a place of love, but if it comes with expectations, if it comes with a price tag, it's not truly love, and that's a hard thing to hear, right? Because a lot of times children are incredible investments. I was working with someone that had like $250,000 in student loan debt.
Oh.
And she's like, he's going to go into default and I got to, figure this out. It's going to ruin his future. It's like, this is his bed. You know what I mean? I know that it sucks and you have to watch it unfold, but he made these decisions, and you giving him $250,000, I don't know if she had it or whatever, but it's like you giving him that money will not solve the problem that unfolded, right?
And that's like one of the hardest things I think that you can hear as a family, or as the addict alcoholic themselves, is like, man, the inside is where you're going to find this. Like, what? You know what I mean? And then when you're telling the parent who's just been watching this for 10, 15, 20 years that like that human being needs to find this within themselves, is like, you might as well, yeah, exactly. Like, might as well chalk it up, but like, but then maybe it does bring them closer to kind of like the surrender piece that we were talking about. Like, get out of the way.
And there's a community aspect to it too, right? Like, you need constant reinforcement. The idea would be like, it takes a village, right? I in any individual that I've worked with in recovery, you can identify at least 24 people that had an impact on that individual's recovery journey, successful or not, right? And so that means that for some of the unsuccessful, you're talking about hundreds of people that have touched this thing. And then all of a sudden, again, think about that narcissistic whiplash of a parent to say, oh, well, hundreds of people can't fix him, but I can, right? And the challenge there is that oftentimes parents are unable to view themselves as any part of the problem. And that's because both parties are still focused on that mindset, the scoreboard mindset of, oh, well, he did this, therefore I shouldn't have to do any work, right? And in many ways, they're justified, right? Not just justified internally by their ego, but justified by society, right? In all sorts of different ways. Oh, that's terrible, right? Why would he ever do that? Think about, friends of your parents or something like that, and they come to you and, and they're like, mom said that, or, Becky said that that their son did something, and I lost my, I was going to say.
I get where you're going with it, though. I get where you're going with it. And you're like, yeah, fuck him, right?
Yeah. Exactly, right? It's this idea that, like, we know the play. And it's not true. And the reason why it's more difficult for family members is because they haven't done something so outlandish as get addicted to drugs. And that comes from a different place, a sense of, addiction is inflicted in those with weak will, right? And it's sort of like poor, morality, right? It's this idea that like something is wrong with that person. And so also in the family system, you just have to educate around, the disease model of addiction, right? And then just as you would plug in someone in recovery into, some sort of fellowship, you would do the same with a family member. You would try and get them plugged into anything that allowed them to understand the need for an inward search for the answer instead of a complete reliance on the other individual to try and recover.
Yeah, I can always tell when I'm chatting with parents who do have some sort of network or community or fellowship that they're a part of, their verbiage, their lack of scoreboard. And I'm always so excited when I chat with these people, man. I'm so excited. I'm like, you're doing your homework, man. Like,
it makes they're doing the job for me.
This is good. Like, whatever you're doing. Recently, we took off in some group. I cannot remember the name of it. But I get a lot of calls from these moms. And every time I'm like, remind me the name of this group. You guys are amazing. Like, what are you guys telling each other? You guys are really good. It's some acronym. I wish I remembered the name. But so I kind of want to transition the conversation just a bit into still family dynamic, but like how our family dynamic, specifically us three coaches, we talk about our experience. Our family dynamic has changed with, our parents, sisters, brothers, grandmas, whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, extreme amount, right? Like, so there's I had a partner, Nicole, who we like separated through the process of everything. My parents, man, they didn't trust me, which rightfully so, right? My brother rarely wanted to talk to me and all that stuff, and I had all put this out my own. And man, through what I would say is like through the kind of like the action that we're talking about, right? Like through taking this deep look inside, through understanding or coming to some understanding that like, man, I don't know what the scoreboard is, what it looks like, what lights colored are up there. Like, I don't know anything about it. So therefore I continue to walk through life with like happenings. And then I've been given these opportunities, these God moments that Austin was talking about, right? Put in my face where I get the opportunity to all that negative energy or that bad law of attraction, right? That I've been putting out in the world, especially around the people that loved me most. I had the opportunity to change it, to switch it. And now kind of like what it looks like is I talk to my mom each and every day, right? Text message, good morning, good night. I talk to her every Saturday and or Sunday or both. Hey, what's going on in your life? How are you? How's dad? How's everything going there? Right? I talk to my brother a little bit sparingly, but that's because he's a busy man. But like when we talk, like I'm coherent, right? He wants to stay on the phone with me, right? We get to talk about like some old stuff. I remember when I went to see him to sit down and talk with him, and I had this thought process in my brain about how this conversation was going to go, right? I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna tell him this and I'm gonna tell him that, and then like everything's gonna be great, right? And I sat down and the God moment happened. Right. And the God moment was, holy shit, my brother just wants his brother back. And like we sat there and talked about sports for like an hour, right? Like it got through some stuff, but like we sat there and talked about the Eagles, the Philadelphia Eagles for like an hour, right? And like, oh my God, like that's what I had done. I had taken my brother or I had taken myself away from my brother. Like I was just given this opportunity to kind of like step back into the family realm, to the parents, the people that believed in me most. And now even Nicole, like we're extremely good friends, right? We were talking about, I'm helping out her cousin at the moment, or trying to be like involved in it. Right. And we had a dog together I now watch for her and her boyfriend, and like we have a pretty solid relationship, which is like, if you would have told me this, however long ago, I would have probably been laughed in your face, been like, okay, whatever. But like, I'm not going to be happy then. Meanwhile, look at me. You know?
Meanwhile,
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, you know, it was quite a while ago now, and the way, you know, my disease manifested, you know, ultimately ended in, you know, really just isolation, just like not, you know, I was the shame side of things. So it was like, I would go weeks without seeing people at times, just like in the room, just like not thinking about anything. And so there is an element of like robbing that from other people. But then, you know, there also part of that mechanism was sort of censoring, right? Trying as best as I could to kind of censor the environment, and then dreading every moment that I had to rely on this foundational support system in a way that revealed my true, you know, damage, right? And so I think a lot of it initially was just around, it was a lack of understanding. And honestly, that, you know, that's probably how it still is. It's just that through the recovery process, there's no longer the damage, right? So that you can actually recognize the changes that have taken place. But throughout the whole process, you know, like I'm pretty sure, you know, I don't even remember being like congratulated about making any effort in recovery until like 2 or 3 years in by family members. And then when they said that, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm recovered, you know, like, I'm Mr. Recovery, you know what I mean? I'm working in it. I got a license, you know, get out of town. And they're like, good job, Gil. You know, you're turning it around. I'm like, what? You know,
it's turned around.
Yeah, exactly.
Bitch, I'm the president.
Right. And so this idea, it was a humbling experience constantly.
For sure.
A humbling experience constantly. But it was also a beautiful and really magnificent one as it started to, you know, change, you know, into year 5. I've seen it manifest in just such beautiful ways. And I can be supportive and understanding of my parents and their problems. Like, my father had a heart attack last year. I was able to be there, you know, no problem. Right. You know, my mother came over for dinner yesterday. You know, before getting sober, I can't like cognitively, you know, just off the top of my head, remember a time in which my mom and I sat at a table and no one was crying. I can't remember it, right? Like, you know, and now it's a joyful endeavor, right? Where we just get to participate in each other's lives, and that level of anxiety is not there. And in my case, you know, there wasn't an incredible amount of personal healing that I saw on my mom and my dad's side. For us, I think it was a lot more about rebuilding the self-efficacy and creating our own lives so that we could come together in our own lives and then provide what support we could. And so in the process of healing, it was more about boundaries than anything else. And you know, I don't know, I guess it was, you know, John Mark or something, but someone gave my mom great directions because nobody paid for anything. You know, like, I remember, you know, I was like 3 months behind in rent when I came out of like PHP. I was like, what? You know, I got bills, you know, and, you know, I had to like file bankruptcy and I had to go on food stamps, and it was a very humbling experience. But throughout that whole process, right, and then remembering like getting my first paycheck and then like catching up in that and like finishing these things completely on my own, I remember this incredible sense of contentment and peace that I hadn't felt since childhood, if I'm being honest. Sitting on, and you know, it sounds like a ridiculous statement. You're in a sober living with like 16 other random dudes, you know, and all of a sudden I'm the happiest I've ever, you know, I've been since I was a child. Like, you know, it's those kind of moments that sort of remind you of the beauty and the potential of healing that goes along within the recovery process. And in that, once you transform yourself, you become an example not only to other people going through the recovery process, but you become an example of this process to people in your family, to friends, right? Because if you're going to ask me, man, like addiction has nothing to do with drugs. I mean, it really just, it just has nothing to do with drugs, right? It is these attachments that we create and reinforce over a long period of time, and they can be done in any number of ways. And what I found is that every single person has these material attachments, whether it's, creating, pre-existing Amazon shopping lists, or it's, looking forward to spending too much money on a dinner, or it's whatever it is, there's an expectation on external things to fix an internal condition. And, as Gabor Mate would say, I would rightly call that addiction, right? I would rightly call that addiction. Now, it doesn't manifest in the same consequences, which in recovery turns out to be almost a blessing.
Oh, it is.
The consequences were so heavy that I was forced to look at my life in a way that no one else is. And now I'm capable of making profound change and living a life that I actually want to live, because nobody wants to be expectant of Amazon wish lists or expectant of external things or relationships to provide them happiness and joy, because they will always let you down. The only thing that is consistent is God. I mean, it's the only thing that's consistent in this thing. And so we have this beautiful and really, unique opportunity to live a life that we actually wanted to live without any sort of, censoring, right? Without any sort of, pillow talk or whatever, without needing, margaritas on a Friday after a hard week, right? We don't need those things. And therefore we can actually pursue the things that provide us value and purpose and passion.
Woo! I love that shit. Woo! That's, yeah. I mean, I could piggyback off of anything you just said. But no, I mean, I'll just sort of start at the beginning, right? Talking about family dynamics and how that changed. And, it was huge. It's for me, it was, I'll just start this last week in or yesterday. I still can only do about 36 hours with my mother. Love her to death, but she showed up. She comes down, and I'm not nervous about how I look. I'm not nervous about, am I hiding something? How many drinks do I need before she gets here? How many lines should I do before she walks in the door? And then should I have some Coke ready in the closet? And let's make sure the heroin needles are ready to roll for when she's too much and I can't take it anymore, right? And this has been my mindset around my interactions with my mother for over a decade. And instead, she's coming down to visit, and I'm excited. Yeah, front door's unlocked. Just come on in, right? And while not a whole lot has tremendously changed on her end, I feel really good about the part that I've changed within me, right? I'm no longer can be a cause for her to point the finger and say, I'm this way because he's that way, right? I no longer play into that. It's no. And that's really cool, right? And I get to show up for her in a way where I believe she always was trying to show up for me. I get to show up in a way where I can be impartial and kind of remove emotion from it, or alcohol-induced emotion from it, and see things more objectively, and know when to remove myself from a potential argument. And she came down, and we got to go listen to some live music, and it was good. And then off she goes, and my dynamic has changed with everyone in my family for probably about a decade, but probably a real solid 5 years. I never, ever spoke to my sister, my brother, my dad, like at all. Maybe twice a year. I didn't speak to anyone. I hid in the room. I was too embarrassed of the way I looked. I was too embarrassed of what I did for work. I was too embarrassed of what I drove. I was too embarrassed of my life. I had built up all these expectations of how I should act and how I should present myself. And the easiest way for them not to know is they're just never going to talk to me. I'm never going to see them. And now I chat with my brother all the time. We're always mapping out our next concert, our next vacation, when he's going to come down, who we're going to go see, what we're going to go do. And wow, we did a little bit of that earlier in my life. I no longer now have to worry about, do I have enough drugs to make it through a weekend with my brother? Do I have enough? You know what I mean? He shows down, he does what he does, I do what I do, and we have a shit ton of fun together. My sister, I just got to go visit in Chicago. In active addiction, I'd never be invited to go to my sister's house, right? Like that would never happen. And so it's super cool, right? And my relationship with my dad has grown tremendously, and all that to say, it started slow, right? And I was really thankful that I didn't come from like super enabling, right? I was the self-efficacy, bro, like, which by the way is my new word. It really was instilled for me from the very beginning. It was figure it the fuck out, right? I showed up at state funded treatment centers. I showed up in psych wards, state funded psych wards. I showed up in jail cells and prison cells, the works, right? It was figure it out. A lot of that self-induced. Too much ego built around I'm independent. I don't need your help to ask for help. And so I'm thankful for that. Super thankful for that. From the very, very beginning, right? It was figure it out. And that's a good place to be, right? And I guess what I figured out, what did I figure out? Right? How do you answer that question?
The two things that I heard that really aligned from both of you all, what you had to say is that like this realization around this life is a life of impermanence. Everything is impermanent except for one thing, whatever you want to call it. If you want to personify it, you can call it God, and that's perfectly fine. But there's a ton of different names for it, right? And putting that personification on it probably doesn't give it as much respect as it deserves, right? And these attachments that you had talked about, and you had said something, Austin, about your mom, and you were like, there she goes, right? And like, and again, this is not an everyday practice, but like when I see the world as this world of all of this stuff is impermanent, this table is impermanent, I'm impermanent, you're impermanent, right? Like all of these things, like I tend to walk through life not attaching to things so much, right? When shit's popping up around, whether it be work, whether it be the world, right? Whether it be politics or any of that stuff, it's kind of like I'm playing a game here, and I got some time to do it, and this is pretty fun. And when I do see that aspect of this life as being impermanent, it kind of, if you guys ever felt like restraints when you're living, like you almost feel like you know what I mean? It seems released. And it's like a beautiful way to step back and look at like, right? Like, I got to act a certain way. I got to look a certain way. I got to feel, I got to do this, got to do that. Everything needs to be perfect before she comes and after she, or like, and during when she's here and after she goes. And like, that just doesn't happen anymore. This is an impermanent life. And I get to sit down with somebody and have a shared experience that I call my mom.
Well, I mean, it's a ridiculous sentiment that I can look at other people and then try and value and base my life off of what I perceive in the very limited perceptions that I have, and then judge myself for those things in a way that is, so critical that it cripples me. Right. And I think that, the change, that paradigm switch, we talked from fear to faith, right? But that paradigm change is what I've found inspires others. It's the thing that kind of makes you glow a little bit different, right? It's the thing that brings a level of inspiration to places that there's not, right? And I think that that's why you have such a magnificent sort of presence of God in the rooms and in this group conscious, right? This idea where you have all these people coming together, and for the first time they're like, we're gonna, or not first time, but in a collective sense, all going, we're going to move towards something positive, at least for right this moment. And then all of a sudden, beautiful things happen, right? Expectations start to shatter, realizations start to happen, right? The truth starts to come out in a way that is humbling, but also empowering, right? In a way that actually makes us excited to live life, right? And previously, in many ways, we were just looking to subsist, right? Subsist off of what we had, again, in that very sort of hoardish mentality, right? Where it's like, well, I only have this, therefore, I got to protect it at all costs. Austin and I was like, it's like, let's isolate. Like, that'll fix it. I won't harm anyone if I'm not doing anything. Right? This idea that like I can somehow, control the consequences of my behaviors instead of just being able to focus on doing my best, right? Whatever that is in any setting.
And I want to go back to what Bro was talking about. It's sort of all relative, right? In the space of time, right? And like to think that we know what's going to happen tomorrow, we have a vague idea, but to think that we have an idea of what your life, especially early in recovery, is going to look like in 2 months, 3 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, the amount of progress and the difference in who I am today versus who I was less than 3 years ago is fucking mind-blowing, right? The things I have, and not even like physical possessions, like my daughter and my family, right? Like we were just talking about, what is it like with your family? Well, I can tell you right now, right? I'm a father today, and like it's the fucking craziest thing in the world, dude. It's the craziest thing in the world. Never in a million years did I think an active addiction, hey, what would be a good idea? Let's have a baby, right? And
that'll fix it.
That'll fix it. And like today, it's like, holy shit, dude. Talk about perspective change, and then talk about a difference in time, right? We're talking about like, I don't know what tomorrow holds. Like, I have no idea. Every day I look at my daughter, she's different than the day before, and I'm like, holy shit, am I changing like that too? Like, am I different than I was yesterday? Because she grew like an inch. She's got like 2 new teeth today, and now she calls me dada. Like, what is going on here, right? And I remember when she was like this big, and it's like, and then you get like a whole different perspective change on like how your parents must have felt when like you were a baby. And it's like, holy shit, did someone love me this much when I was little? And like the very minimal answer is enough to feed you, wipe your ass, and like put a roof over your head, which is a lot in and of itself, let alone all the other million things me and my wife do to make sure that she's happy and taken care of. Right. The dance parties I have with her, man, like me and my daughter, bro, I put her in her little boppy, which is like this little chair thing. And I set her on the countertop every day when I pick her up. And it's like our little time. It's like an hour and a half before mommy gets home, and I cook food and we listen to the Grateful Dead and we dance, and it's and like I can tell she knows it's coming, bro. Like she knows it's coming. I open up the car seat to like get her out, and she's like, yes, it's time, and we just rock out. And so like to loop back around to where I started this, which is like the perspective of time, right? This is absolutely something I talk with my guys, right? Like early in, right? It's like, dude, like this is today, but like you honestly, dude, like you have no idea. You're selling yourself short. One of the things I do with all of my people, right, is we outline goals and we outline how we're going to achieve these goals. And I give them like this cool little way of doing it, right? And making it super simplistic. And then, we get into the subconscious mind about like how we place it around the house and like how often we read it and all that. But the whole idea is super simple. Before I was talking about goals, what was I talking about?
You kind of went off there, but that's good. That's good.
What I'm saying.
Well, dude, I think like kind of something that you were saying is like setting the goals that you do with the guys that you speak with.
Oh, time.
Right? There you go.
Time was the topic.
Oh, yeah.
And so like, when we lay out the 1 month, 2 month, 3 month time frames, right? And then we get to the 1 year and the 5 year, and we talk about the 5 year goals or even the 6 month goals. I'm like, dude, you are selling yourself way fucking short. Wait till you see what your life looks like in 6 months. If you do half the shit I suggest that you do, if you do half the things me and my coaches suggest that you do, your life is going to look so much better than that, brother. Like, I promise. And like, it just, the whole time concept is cool too, right? And it's another thing you hear a lot of too, is like certain people will really hang their hat on like how long they've been sober. And wow, that's great. Like that is great. And like, I am proud of you. Like what does your life look like? Right? Like how fucking happy are you? Right? 'Cause I talk to dudes with 3 months sobriety that, holy shit, dude, like that's incredible. Like, what are you doing today? What are you doing tomorrow? Like,
and their eyes are just burning. They're just like,
just lit up on fire, right? And like, it comes down to the quality of it, right? And the more quality days you have, right, the greater the time looks, and the more things you accomplish, man, and self-efficacy becomes just
Love that
Like
word.
how I dropped that again?
Yeah, that's a good one. We'll get
becomes part
t-shirts.
of it.
Yeah, and the one thing, like, Austin kind of went into the 4D thing, and what I found in meditation, and like even more so, breath work was more so like a more recent thing that I really dove into. Besides, because the meditation was just something that like I glommed onto, I guess, like early on. It's just like, okay, and what I was able to find is like, I found peace in not understanding, right? Like, and what I found peace in unknowing and not understanding. And I also found excitement and enthusiasm in the idea that I didn't know, right? Like that every new day was that. It was a new day, right? And I remember kind of like previous, however many years ago, that like every day did feel like the same, but it was like the only difference was like what time my guy was showing up or what time I was getting, you know what I mean?
You know what I mean? Yeah. Months just flowing into each other.
Yep, just all merged together, and I look at this impermanent look at life and how it can change so quickly. You were talking about your daughter, right? And I find excitement behind that instead of fear, right? I find faith behind that like, man, things are going to work out just the way they're supposed to work out. And like, it might look like shit, but I'm going to be happy about it. Let's do this. Right. Like, and that became like such an exciting part to me is being able to find that divine peace or whatever inside that, and you trust it. Yeah. And it's in you. And I trust that, like, cool, whatever it looks like, it's going to be tomorrow. Whether I got to go get food stamps, right? Or whatever it is with Austin. With me, it was like, Jesus Christ, like, you know what I mean? Like, how am I going to get out of my own way? And then I started to trust this thing, and it was through meditation that I started to trust it and started to really believe that, like, man, this thing moving forward, this impermanent life is a beautiful, beautiful thing, and I should get excited about this. And just be happy because, like, this is, I think Alan Watts talks about it, like, this is a game, right? We're playing the life of game, or the game of life. Like, when we play games, like, what are we usually doing? What are you usually doing with your daughter when you're jumping around and playing that game and listening to Grateful Dead? You're having a fucking great time. So, like, with 4D and like, kind of the stuff that we go down the avenues, the things that we talk about, whether it be in the gym or whether it be sitting in the own position, right? Or whether it be, expanding with the family and stuff like that, is like, we find happiness and sincerity in that happiness, and not just like this pretend happiness that I would have put on previously to my family, right? Like, oh, I'm good. I was the I'm good guy. But I do find it's it's an absolutely genuine feeling, which is a beautiful thing. Like, when you're like, oh my God, what is that?
No, I love the idea of starting every day with new possibilities, right? And like, right out of the gates, what I'm doing in the morning, right, is I'm praying to the Creator, the universe, God, Jesus, whatever you want to call it, makes no difference to me. How do we kick ass today, right? And another practice I like to implement, and we're going to do it right here, right now. I do it every Sunday. I do it with people who are on our teams, right? I text them a lot more than you guys do. This is my job, right? I text them a lot more than you guys do, and I actually learned this practice from my dad. And then now I just apply it to different things. But my dad was very business goal focused. He actually does it. Dad's a pretty successful human being. He manages a bunch of people, and he does this with his teams on Sundays. At least he used to. It's what makes this week great, right? What makes this week great? So we're talking about becoming self-efficient, right? And self-efficacy. And I'm talking about these little victories that add up to that. And we're talking about how we become independent and kick-ass, and we find purpose, aim, and direction, which I will never shut up about, right? Like, what's our purpose? What's our aim? What's our direction? And a great way to do it is every Sunday, right? Shoot off this message. What makes this week great? Man, what do you guys think? Give me a couple bullet points of like, what's going to make this week great?
You got it.
What makes this week great? Man, for me, it's a week is great anytime I get the opportunity or I make the time in order to cook my own food.
Sick.
I know that sounds weird to some people. Like, some people think cooking is quite a chore, but it's like, that to me is not only is it very zen and very like creative in many ways, but it's the perfect embodiment, in my idea, about the self-confidence and the esteem that I've built in my life, is that I'm capable of providing myself food, and I'm capable of feeding myself extremely nutritious and awesome, tasty stuff.
Hell yeah.
And and I've showed you my picture of my cow and my
Yeah.
I got a whole cow in my freezer.
It's an animal, dude. Yeah.
I got like 8 dozen eggs in the
Hell, you gotta go with the eggs.
And guys, like, so other things that can be included, right? I'll go next. What makes this week great? This week I want to take 2 rest days, right? So I want to dial back the amount of time I spend in the gym. I want to do 2 rest days. And on those rest days, I want to implement foam rolling and stretching the entire hour. Another thing that makes this week great is every morning, regardless of if I'm at work at 4:30 a.m. or not, I'm doing 3 a.m. wake up calls because I want to spend an extra 30 minutes in meditation this week. And then what also makes this week great is this upcoming weekend, I'm going to Boston to bury a friend who died of alcoholism. And I want to show up. So I'm coordinating with the rest of the guys on this trip, and all kids I grew up with, some of my lifelong best friends, and they're all talking about how drunk they want to get, what bars they want to go to, and they all know I'm sober, and so like I've become the designated DD. But I'm really going to encourage these guys to show up at a fucking funeral where someone died of alcoholism, not drunk. You know, I don't feel like that's a lot to ask, and so hopefully by me being sober, I can sort of steer the ship in the right direction. And so that's how I'm going to wrap out this week, making it great. And this practice I do every Sunday like clockwork. And it's a great way to keep that aim and direction and taking those steps forward.
Yeah. No, I like that for sure. Man, and so many things come up. And I think that that's part of the hope that is built in the recovery process, is that like greatness is just a couple acts away, and being able to show up and do extra things that promote that sense of contentment and purpose should be really the ultimate goal of your recovery process, to put the pieces into play where they weren't before, right? And that makes me think, I have a trip planned in October to go to Spain, and I I don't know about you guys, but you can't travel when you're one, you don't have any money. You don't have any money.
I've smuggled heroin on many an airplane.
Well, maybe don't say that on record, but
And there it was.
Don't do it anymore. What are they gonna do now?
So I mean, for me, it's like that is the perfect it's like, wow, like I have a job that will let me do that. I have finances that allow me to do that. I have family that I don't mind doing that with, right? It's this perfect embodiment of these things. And, and so giving back is another one, right? So like next week I'm, volunteering at, I like to volunteer at the food bank and do like the mobile pantry. So that always makes a week great too, is anytime I get to give back, and I have a new business. Anytime I, pump effort into that, and I get to see tangible change in other people's lives as I do, in my full-time job as a counselor, is just amazing, right? It's such a privilege to be able to be this conduit of an experience of a set of sort of skills or really perceptions and understandings based off my own experience and the experience I've worked with others, and provide that to people that are still struggling. It's like, it's such a privilege. So, anytime I get to show up and make a difference is really a great week.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
All right, what makes this week great?
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost, it's an every week making it great thing. Is like I love cutting my lawn, man. You can ask anybody that I've ever bought a house with or anything like that. Like, what are you looking forward to most? Like cutting my lawn. I just love it. I love being able to bring right. I love being able to bring beauty to like the surrounding area where I lay my head, and where my partner lays my head, and my stepdaughter lays her head, and I find a lot of pride in whatever that feeling is, right?
Sense of accomplishment.
And on to that, right? The desk that we're sitting at. Me and Austin carried in a very light kitchen table today.
It's like a 500-pound desk.
But we're now moving on to putting together our coffee table. So we're going to build our coffee table. So that's the next one that's coming down the line, my friend.
Don't ask me to help you move.
Yeah, I think we'll be all right. I think we'll be all right with that.
I'm just kidding.
Putting that in, and then actually to the gym point is I had like shoulder injuries and knee injuries and stuff, and instead of really leaning in, as we talked about last time, right? I kind of just would be like, I can't lift heavy weight because of this, because of that. I've gotten into the heavy weight lifting again, so it's another week of that, which it brings excitement. It's like different. Go into the gym and you're like, okay, I'm doing some different stuff. I'm away from like the kettlebells and like all of the calisthenics, and I'm on to the barbells and the free squats and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, different animal. But it brings a lot of excitement. So.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Sense of accomplishment again, right? Sense of accomplishment. Little victories, baby. Little victories. Dustin, how long we been chatting, bro?
We're cresting to 90 minutes.
Okay.
So we should
Cool.
wrap up.
Let's wrap it up. Let's be respectful of everybody's time here, man. Do you want to plug your
Well,
I did this brain scan with Gil. Super badass. I'm gonna let him explain it.
So the small business I was referencing, we started a neurofeedback company which monitors brain activity in real time, and then we use that information to pick protocols that allow for certain regulatory patterns to unfold. So it helps with things like ADHD, anxiety, insomnia. It really has a huge breadth. I was introduced to it in the outpatient addiction setting, mainly because, you have folks that are coming in to these rehab facilities and maybe they're on narcotic prescriptions and they need to come off of it safely. Neurofeedback is an incredible way for people to step down from medication in a very responsible and permanent way. And so we do that with unexpected pregnancies in women, right? We help them to tear down, their medications in order to, not, have these sort of manic freakouts, right? But we also help, we're reaching out and have partnered with the schools in order to provide an intervention for folks trying to avoid ADHD and stimulant medication, which we know have tons of side effects, many of which are pretty detrimental to a child. So it's really exciting work. And if you're unfamiliar with neurofeedback, you can always, contact us at northaustinneurofeedback.com.
Perfect. We'll throw a link in the bottom, get everybody connected on that too. And man, that's it, man. We're going to wrap it up here. If you guys, again, dude, I say this every time when we close this out. If you guys have questions, you want to get connected, the consultation with us is absolutely free. You have access to all the coaches. We're here to help. Love chatting with you guys. And thank you guys.
Thank you.
Buddy.
Bye.